The human colony of Aurelia Prime rested on the edge of the galaxy, a jewel of silver towers and golden fields. Its people believed they were safe. Children played in meadows. Traders filled the markets with laughter. Ships came and went from the docks carrying minerals, food, and dreams. To the colonists, life felt secure, like the dangers of war were centuries away. But in the silence of deep space, something vast was moving. The first sign came when the skies over Aurelia turned dark. At first, the colonists thought it was a storm, rolling clouds casting shadows across the fields. But storms do not move in formation. Storms do not glimmer with metallic light. When people looked up, they saw it. A wall of alien warships blotting out the sun. The colony alarms began to scream. Mothers grabbed their children. Soldiers rushed to defense stations. Ships in the docks scrambled to launch, but their engines were too slow. By the time Aurelia Prime understood the danger, it was already too late. The aliens attacked without a word. No message. No demand. No warning. Beams of energy lit the skies like burning spears. Towers crumbled in an instant. Whole streets vanished in fire. The ground shook as explosions ripped through the colony. A worker in the central hub, a young man named Darius, fell to his knees as the floor buckled beneath him. He had only seconds to run before the ceiling collapsed behind him. His ears rang with the cries of people around him. Voices drowned by thunder. Through broken glass, he saw the impossible sight. Entire neighborhoods erased in a single blast. The colony militia tried to fight back. Small defense ships lifted from launch pads, firing streams of missiles toward the alien fleet. For a brief moment, hope flickered. But the alien shields shimmered, and the missiles burst uselessly against them. A wave of enemy fire followed, tearing the defense ships into dust. The sky became a graveyard of burning metal. On the ground, soldiers dragged civilians into bunkers. But even the bunkers shook as alien blasts struck deeper and deeper into the earth. The colony governor sent frantic distress calls across the galaxy. Aurelia Prime under attack. Alien fleet. Overwhelming force. Send help. The transmission ended in silence. One by one, communication stations were destroyed. The colony's voice was cut off. Its pleas unheard. Darius stumbled into the ruins of a marketplace. Smoke stung his eyes. Fires roared around him. And everywhere he looked, there were bodies. Friends. Neighbors. Children who would never grow again. He could barely breathe, but he forced himself forward, hiding under collapsed beams, crawling through ash. Above him, the alien ships hovered like predators. Methodical. Unfeeling. Their weapons carved the colony apart piece by piece. It was not a battle. It was extermination. Darius reached a ridge at the edge of the city. From there, he saw the true scale of destruction. Entire districts lay in ruins. Mountains burned. The ocean boiled where alien weapons had struck the water. The colony that once held millions of lives was being wiped out in a single day. He wanted to scream, but his voice would be lost in the roar. He wanted to fight, but his hands were empty. All he could do was watch as the place he called home died before his eyes. In the sky, the alien flagship drifted forward, larger than a city, black and sharp-edged, glowing with rivers of orange light. From its core came the deadliest strike yet. A beam of white fire fell upon the colony's capital tower. In seconds, the proud spire that had touched the clouds was nothing but dust in the wind. Panic spread like wildfire. Civilians fled through the streets, running toward the forests, the caves, anywhere that promised shelter. But the aliens showed no mercy. Strike after strike followed them. The ground split open, swallowing those who ran. Forests caught fire, trapping people in flames. Darius collapsed against a broken wall, trembling. His body was covered in ash. His hands shook with rage and fear. He whispered to himself, as if clinging to the words could keep him alive. They came without mercy. The screams of the dying echoed across the valley. The colony's last defense ship streaked upward, engines flaring bright, a desperate attempt to reach space and call for help. For a moment, Darius's heart leapt. Maybe they would make it. Maybe the galaxy would hear of this massacre. But the alien fleet saw it too. A single shot cut across the sky, striking the ship before it cleared the atmosphere. The vessel exploded in a ball of fire, raining fragments down upon the ruins. That was the last hope. Darius pressed his forehead to the dirt. His tears mixed with blood and ash. He could hear the heavy steps of alien machines moving through the wreckage, finishing what their ships had begun. They killed anyone they found. They left nothing alive. The colony of Aurelia Prime was falling, and no one was coming to save it. 4 hours, the destruction continued. By nightfall, there was no night, only burning light. The land itself was scorched. The rivers poisoned. The forests blackened. The colony was gone. But even as Darius lay hidden among the ruins, one thought burned in his heart, stronger than the fire around him. He knew this truth would not stay hidden forever. He knew humanity would hear what happened here. And when they did, the galaxy would never be the same. Far across the stars, Earth spun quietly in its orbit, unaware of the firestorm that had consumed Aurelia Prime. In the great cities, people lived their lives. Working, building, dreaming of futures in the far colonies. News from the frontier usually came slow. Sometimes weeks. Sometimes months. But when silence stretched too long, leaders began to worry. It started as a whisper. The last transmissions from Aurelia had been broken. Fragments of words carried through static. Under attack, alien fleet. Send help. Then nothing. The colony was gone from the maps. Its signals dead. In the central halls of Earth's government, silence filled the chamber as the governors listened to the final recording. The words were faint, but the fear in them was clear. No one in that room could mistake it. "This was no accident," said Admiral Thorne, his voice sharp. "This was an attack. A massacre." Others hesitated. The counselors shifted in their seats, faces pale. War with an unknown species was no small matter. To fight would mean risking the survival of every human world. But to do nothing would mean surrendering the lives already lost. Admitting humanity could be broken, colony by colony. The debate raged through the night. Voices clashed like steel. Some called for caution. Some begged for peace. But louder than them all was the demand for justice. Across the network, civilians shouted, protested, wept. Screens filled with the faces of refugees who had escaped on tiny transports before the colony was destroyed. They told their stories with tears in their eyes. Stories of burning skies. Of children lost. Of fire raining from alien hands. The people of Earth listened. And their anger became a storm. No leader could ignore it. The council rose the next day with their choice clear. Humanity would not retreat into silence. Humanity would rise in fury. The order spread across every world. Every station. Every dockyard. Prepare the fleet. Factories lit up with fire as new ships rolled from their forges. Engines were built by the thousands. Weapons mounted by the millions. Crews volunteered faster than names could be written. Men and women from every colony came forward, swearing to fight. Some carried the memory of family lost on Aurelia. Others carried only the weight of duty. All of them carried rage. In the orbit of Earth, the first great armada took form. Hundreds of ships lined the black sky, their hulls glowing under the sun. Then thousands. Then tens of thousands. The galaxy had seen wars before, but never had it seen this. For the first time in history, every human colony stood united under one banner. Ships came from Mars, Titan, Europa, from stations beyond Pluto, from mining outposts in the Kuiper Belt. They came from colonies light years away, traveling through worm gates to answer the call. The number grew until it dwarfed imagination. 700,000 warships. From the smallest scout frigates to the largest dreadnoughts, the fleet stretched farther than the eye could follow. It was not just a fleet. It was a moving wall of steel. A tide of fire waiting to be unleashed. Inside the flagship, the Sword of Retribution, Admiral Kalen stood before his crew. His face was lined with years of battle, his voice steady, but his eyes burned with something deeper. "They thought we would fall quietly," he said. "They thought we would bow in fear. But we are humanity. And humanity never bows. They took one colony. We will show them the price of their crime. We will show them our fury. The crew roared, their voices echoing through the steel halls. Soldiers slammed fists against armor. Pilots raised their helmets high. Engineers swore to keep engines burning until victory was won. Word of the fleet spread across the stars. Other species watched in silence. Some trembled. Some whispered warnings. They remembered their own wars, their own losses, but none had ever seen humanity rise like this. The preparations took months, but the fire of vengeance never cooled. Each day, the fleet grew stronger. Each day, the soldiers trained harder. Each day, the memory of Aurelia burned brighter. On the day of departure, the skies above Earth were no longer blue. They were filled with ships, their engines glowing like a second sun. Families gathered on rooftops to watch, waving to loved ones as they marched into the unknown. Children held signs, their words simple but powerful: "Bring them justice." The signal came. Engines flared. And like a storm unchained, the Armada rose. From orbit, it looked like rivers of light pouring into space. From the ground, it looked like the very stars were leaving the sky. The sword of retribution led the way. Its hull black as night, its guns gleaming like fangs. Behind it, hundreds of thousands of warships stretched into the dark. A wall of fury that would not be stopped. Darius, the survivor of Aurelia Prime, had been carried across the stars to Earth. Weak, broken, but alive. As the fleet rose, he stood among the crowds. His face shadowed by the glow of the engines. He whispered the words he had spoken on the day of destruction. They came without mercy. He lifted his head, eyes burning as the sky filled with fire. "And we will answer." The roar of the Armada thundered across the heavens. Humanity had awakened, and the galaxy would soon learn what that meant. The fleet moved like a storm through the endless dark. 700,000 warships stretched across the void, their engines glowing like rivers of fire. For weeks, they traveled through worm gates, each ship passing like a flash of lightning into new star systems. Civilians on distant worlds stood in silence as the fleet passed overhead. Children pressed their faces to windows. Traders stopped their work. Even miners deep in asteroid belts paused to watch the glow that moved across the stars. It was not just a fleet. It was a message. Humanity had risen, and nothing would stand in its way. Inside the ships, tension grew with every jump. Soldiers drilled day and night, repeating the same moves until their bodies ached. Pilots ran through simulations, hands shaking with both fear and hunger for battle. Engineers slept beside their engines, whispering to them as if they were living hearts that needed care. In the Sword of Retribution, Admiral Kalen walked the command deck. He studied maps of alien space projected in glowing light. His officers saluted him with respect, but he said little. His silence was heavier than words. A young officer finally asked, "Admiral, do you believe we can win?" Kalen turned, his gaze steady. "They believe one colony's fall will break us. I believe one colony's fall has made us unstoppable." The words spread through the ship like fire. Soldiers whispered them in the mess halls. Pilots repeated them before takeoff drills. Even the cooks in the kitchen spoke them softly as they stirred their pots. Unstoppable. But the journey was not only fire and pride. In the darkness, doubts lived. Alone in their bunks, some soldiers stared at the ceiling, wondering if the aliens were stronger than anyone could imagine. Others feared they would die far from home, their bodies lost in space. And yet, when the alarms rang for duty, they rose. Doubt could not silence fury. As the fleet drew closer to alien space, the stars themselves seemed to change. The skies grew colder, darker, filled with strange colors. Pulsars flickered like watchful eyes. Entire regions of space lay silent, abandoned by life. Ships reported finding wrecks, destroyed vessels drifting in the void, their designs unfamiliar. They had been erased by the same enemy that had struck Aurelia Prime. One night cycle aboard the Sword of Retribution, Darius was brought to the observation deck. He still carried the ash of his world in his heart. His body was thin, his eyes shadowed. But his voice carried weight. He stood before the soldiers and spoke quietly, yet the room went silent. "I saw what they did. I saw children burning. I saw homes erased in seconds. I should have died with my people. But I lived. And because I lived, I will tell you this. If we do nothing, they will take more. They will take everything. But if we fight, if we strike now, then even if I fall, my world will not be forgotten. It will be avenged. The soldiers stood, fists over their hearts. Some cried openly. Others shouted his name. In that moment, Darius was no longer a victim. He was a symbol of why they fought. When the fleet entered the border of alien space, alarms rang across every deck. Shields powered up. Weapons locked into place. The silence before battle pressed down like a weight. Scouts reported what everyone had waited to hear. The alien fleet had been found. They were not hiding. They were waiting. Thousands upon thousands of alien warships filled the void ahead. Their shapes were jagged. Their surfaces glowing with cruel light. They moved like predators. Silent. Patient. Hungry. The human fleet slowed, stretching across the system like a wall of steel. On every deck, hearts beat faster. Soldiers clenched their weapons. Pilots whispered prayers. Admiral Kalen's voice carried through every ship in the armada. Soldiers of humanity. The enemy waits ahead. They believe we will break. They believe our fire will fade. Show them they are wrong. Show them that for one colony lost, we will answer with the fury of 700,000 warships. Show them what it means to awaken humanity's wrath. The ships roared as one. Engines flaring. Weapons ready. The battle was about to begin. The black void of space became a stage where two titans faced one another. On one side, the alien fleet, their jagged ships glowing with cruel red light, spread across the horizon like blades of fire. On the other, the human armada. 700,000 warships stretching farther than the eye could follow. Engines blazing like a second galaxy. The silence was unbearable. For long minutes, neither side moved. Soldiers on human ships gripped their weapons, sweat running down their palms. Pilots sat frozen in cockpits, the glow of targeting screens reflecting in their eyes. It was as if the whole universe held its breath. Then a single light flared. One alien ship opened fire. The first beam cut across the void, striking a human cruiser. The vessel exploded, fragments spinning into darkness. For a heartbeat, the fleet went silent in shock. Then Admiral Kalen gave the order. Return fire. The sky lit up like a newborn star. Human cannons thundered as hundreds of thousands of warships released their fury. Missiles streaked through the black, cutting trails of fire. Beams of blue and white energy crossed like lightning. The alien fleet answered with their own storm. Red bolts tore through human formations, ripping frigates apart. Whole squadrons vanished in the blink of an eye. The battle had begun. On the bridge of the Sword of Retribution, Kalen stood firm as the ship shuddered under fire. Officers shouted reports, their voices urgent. Left flank breaking. Shields holding but weakening. Enemy weapons tearing through Sector 9. Kalen's voice cut through the chaos. Hold formation. Press forward. No retreat. Across the armada, human warships surged ahead. Smaller frigates darted between alien cruisers, launching torpedoes into their weak points. Dreadnoughts fired massive plasma cannons, each shot cracking alien shields like glass. Carriers released swarms of fighters that filled the void with streaks of light. But the aliens were relentless. Their weapons struck with terrifying precision. Whole human fleets were caught in webs of red fire and burned into silence. The void became a graveyard of drifting metal and fading lives. In the chaos, Darius sat aboard a troop carrier, strapped into a drop pod. Around him were soldiers in black armor, silent, waiting for the green light. Through the small glass above, he saw the storm outside. The clash of giants shaking the stars. His heart pounded, but his jaw was set. He had lost his world once. He would not lose this fight. The aliens unleashed their most terrible weapon. From the heart of their flagship, a sphere of burning energy expanded, sweeping across space. Dozens of human ships were erased in an instant, their hulls melting before they could fire. The shockwave rattled through the armada, throwing ships out of position. Panic rippled across the channels. Some captains shouted for retreat. Others screamed for orders. But Kalen did not waver. His eyes locked on the alien flagship, a monstrous vessel larger than a city, glowing with rivers of red. "All ships," Kalen commanded, his voice cold as steel. "Focus fire on their flagship. Break their heart, and the body will fall." The sword of retribution led the charge. Its engines roared as it cut through enemy lines, cannons blazing. Human warships followed in waves, slamming missiles and plasma bolts into the alien behemoth. The aliens answered with fire so fierce it blinded sensors. Human ships burst apart. But still, more pressed forward. For every vessel lost, another took its place. Humanity refused to yield. In the carrier, the light above Darius's pod turned green. The doors opened. Soldiers launched into the void. Pods streaked toward the alien ships, glowing like meteors. The soldiers would fight inside the monsters themselves. Darius closed his eyes as his pod shook, whispering his vow. For Aurelia. For every life they stole. Back in the battle, the flagship clash reached its peak. The sword of retribution locked weapons with the alien Titan. The two ships hammered each other with every strike. Alarms screamed across Kalen's deck. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Officers struggled to stay on their feet as the ship trembled under blow after blow. "Admiral," one shouted, "we cannot take much more." Kalen's eyes never left the burning enemy before him. "Then we will give everything." The sword of retribution rammed forward, its cannons firing at point-blank range. Alien shields cracked. Red light burst apart as human fire tore through the flagship's armor. The alien Titan roared back with its own fury, blasting holes through human squadrons. The void was chaos. Ships collided. Fighters spiraled into flames. The stars themselves seemed to vanish under the storm of weapons. But through it all, humanity did not falter. On every channel, soldiers shouted the same words. For Elysium. For humanity. At last, cracks spread across the alien flagship. Its hull glowed with fractures. Its weapons dimmed. And in that moment, Kalen gave the final order. "All ships. Finish it." A wall of human fire rained down. Plasma, missiles, beams, everything humanity had left poured into the alien heart. The flagship shuddered, screamed, and finally erupted in an explosion so bright it lit the system like a second sun. For a breathless moment, silence returned. Soldiers stared. Pilots froze. Officers whispered in disbelief. The alien flagship was gone. But the battle was not over. Across the horizon, thousands of alien warships still fought with fury. Humanity had struck the heart, but the body still lived. The sword of retribution floated among wreckage, its hull torn, its engines burning. Kalen stood, blood on his forehead, his voice raw. "This is only the beginning," he whispered. And as the battle raged on, humanity pressed forward. Their wrath unstoppable. Their vengeance undeniable. The galaxy would never forget this day. The day the humans came. The explosion of the alien flagship lit the void like a sun. For a brief heartbeat, all sides froze, watching the monster that had once ruled the battle tear itself apart. Debris scattered across the black, glowing red as it drifted into silence. For humanity, it was proof the enemy could bleed. But the war was not yet won. Across the horizon, the alien armada still stretched wide, tens of thousands of ships burning with fury. Their commanders screeched orders through strange signals, pushing their fleets forward with desperate rage. The death of their flagship had only sharpened their hunger for revenge. The human fleet did not retreat. They pressed forward. 700,000 warships moved like a single tide, their cannons blazing. The void filled again with fire. Darius's drop pod crashed into the hull of an alien warship. The door blasted open, and he and his squad spilled into fire and smoke. Inside the alien corridors, the air was thick with heat. Strange symbols glowed on the walls. The sound of alien roars echoed through the steel. Blasters lit the halls. Soldiers cut down alien warriors with precise fire. Darius pushed forward, his rifle trembling in his hands, until he reached the core chamber. There he saw it. Rows of alien pods pulsing with light. The promise of more war to come. He did not hesitate. With a scream, He threw his grenades. Fire washed over the chamber. The pods burned. The chamber shook. Darius staggered back, his heart pounding. "This is for Aurelia," he whispered. Across space, similar battles raged inside alien ships. Human boarding parties stormed vessel after vessel, burning their cores, tearing apart their weapons. For every soldier lost, 10 more pushed forward. The aliens fought with savage power, but they had not expected such fury. Humanity's vengeance was not measured in numbers. It was measured in fire, in will, in a refusal to break. Hours passed. Space became a graveyard littered with wreckage. Alien fleets that had once seemed endless began to shrink. Their weapons grew slower, their movements less sharp. Piece by piece, they fell apart under humanity's storm. On the sword of retribution, alarms still screamed. But Kalen's eyes remained locked on the battle. His ship had been torn open in places, fires raging through decks, yet it still fought. Still burned with life. "Admiral," an officer shouted, "the enemy lines are collapsing." Kalen stood tall, his voice carrying like thunder. "Then break them. End this." The final strike came as the Armada surged one last time. Hundreds of thousands of human ships unleashed their fury together. A storm of fire that swallowed the alien fleet. Ship after ship cracked, broke, and vanished into explosions. The void shook as the last alien dreadnought was torn apart. And then, silence. The battlefield lay in ruins. Wrecks of alien vessels drifted lifeless, their red glow fading. Human ships floated among them, scarred and burning, but alive. For the first time since Aurelia Prime had fallen, humanity could breathe. In the sword of retribution, Kalen lowered his head. His voice was heavy but firm. "It is done. Humanity stands." On Earth and every colony, news spread like fire. Screens lit up with images of the battle, of the Armada, of the enemy defeated. Crowds filled the streets, weeping, cheering, shouting the same word: victory. But in the hearts of those who fought, it was not joy alone. It was sorrow for the millions lost. It was grief for the colony that had burned. And it was a vow: this would never happen again. Darius stood aboard a transport, staring out at the wreckage drifting across the stars. His body shook with exhaustion. His face was scarred, but his eyes were clear. He whispered the words he had spoken since the beginning. "They came without mercy, and we answered." The fleet gathered its dead, repaired its wounds, and turned for home. Humanity had shown its wrath, and the galaxy had witnessed it. Every species that watched from afar now understood. Humanity was not fragile, not broken, not weak. One colony had fallen. But in its fall, it had awakened something greater. An unyielding fire that no enemy could extinguish. The journey home was long. The ships that had left as a storm returned as survivors, battle-scarred, weary, but unbroken. Darius stood at the observation deck of his transport, watching the stars slide past. He thought of Aurelia, of the people he had lost, of the family he would never see again. But he also thought of the soldiers who had fought beside him, of the admiral who had refused to yield, of the 700,000 warships that had answered a colony's cry. He was not alone. He would never be alone again. When the fleet finally reached Earth, the skies filled once more, not with weapons, but with celebration. Ships parted to reveal the blue planet below, waiting like a homecoming embrace. Darius stepped onto solid ground for the first time in months. He fell to his knees and pressed his hands to the soil. He was home. Aurelia was gone. But humanity remained. Admiral Kalen stood before the assembled fleet one final time. His voice carried across the crowd, not with triumph, but with remembrance. "We did not seek this war. They brought it to our doorstep. They took a colony. They murdered millions. And we answered. Not because we wanted blood, because we wanted justice. Because we wanted to ensure that no enemy ever looks at humanity and sees prey." He paused. His eyes swept across the soldiers, the pilots, the engineers, the men and women who had sailed into the dark and returned. "Today we mourn. Today we honor. And tomorrow we rebuild. Stronger than before. United as never before." Because we are humanity. And we do not break. The crowd roared. Not with anger. With resolve. Darius stood among them, silent. He carried the memory of Aurelia in his heart. He would carry it forever. But he also carried something new. Hope. The knowledge that even in the darkest moment, humanity would rise. He looked up at the sky, at the ships still orbiting, at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the galaxy had learned a lesson. But Darius knew the truth. The lesson was not about war. It was about survival. About unity. About the unbreakable fire that burned in every human heart. The war was over. But the story was not. Humanity had been tested. And humanity had endured. For Aurelia. For all who fell. For all who fought. For all who would come after. The stars were not safe. But neither were they empty. And as long as one human remained standing, the galaxy would never forget. They destroyed one colony. We unleashed 700,000 warships of fury. And we won. The celebration lasted 3 days. Then the work began. The fleet was not disbanded. It was reorganized, stationed at key positions throughout human space, a permanent reminder of the price of aggression. The colonies that had once been isolated now shared defense pacts, communication networks, and military coordination. Aurelia Prime had been destroyed. But from its ashes, humanity had forged something stronger, unity. Admiral Kalen retired 6 months after the battle. He moved to a small coastal town on Earth, far from the shipyards and command centers. He did not give interviews. He did not write memoirs. When children asked him about the war, he told them about Darius. About the soldier who had lost everything and still climbed into a drop pod. About the millions who had volunteered. About the 700,000 warships that had sailed into the dark and refused to turn back. Darius was offered a hero's welcome. He declined. He returned to what remained of Aurelia Prime, a scorched world slowly healing. He worked with reconstruction crews, clearing rubble, planting new seeds, building new homes. He did not speak of his escape or his survival. He simply worked. Every day, from dawn until dusk. On the first anniversary of the battle, a memorial was built on the site of Aurelia's capital tower. It was a simple stone column, carved with the names of every colonist who had died. At its base, Darius placed a single flower. Then he stepped back and stood in silence for a long time. The alien species that had watched the war from afar sent delegations to Earth. Not to demand answers, to offer apologies. They had not helped Aurelia. They had not warned humanity. They had stayed silent, afraid of provoking the enemy. Now they came with gifts and treaties and promises of alliance. Kalen, from his retirement, sent a single message to the council. We do not need your apologies. We need your word that this never happens again. Not to us. Not to anyone. The council agreed. A new galactic charter was drafted, one that included mutual defense pacts and early warning systems. Humanity signed it. Not as a junior partner. As an equal. Darius was there for the signing. He stood at the back of the chamber, watching the diplomats shake hands and exchange documents. He thought about the day the skies had turned dark. About the screams. About the fire. He thought about the drop pod. The grenades. The alien warship burning around him. Then he turned and walked out. He had done his part. Now it was time to live. The galaxy changed after the war. Not overnight, but the change was real. Species that had once ignored humanity now listened. Colonies that had once been isolated now had voices. The fear of human wrath became a deterrent, yes, but so did the example of human mercy. Humanity had not exterminated the enemy. They had not pursued them to their home worlds. They had destroyed the fleet that attacked Aurelia, and then stopped. Kalen had given the order himself. We are not conquerors. We are protectors. Let them remember our fury. But let them also remember our restraint. Darius built a house on the new Aurelia. It was small, wood and stone, with a garden in the back. He grew vegetables. He watched the stars. Sometimes, late at night, he would walk to the memorial column and sit in silence. He did not weep. He had no tears left. But he remembered. He would always remember. One evening, a young woman approached him at the memorial. She was a colonist, newly arrived, too young to have seen the destruction. She asked him what it had been like, the battle, the fleet, the 700,000 warships. Darius looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "It was terrible. And it was beautiful. Not because we won, because we came together. For one moment in history, every human stood as one. That is what defeated them. Not our weapons. Our unity." The woman nodded. She did not fully understand. But she would. In time, all humans would understand. The war was over. The memory remained. But so did the peace. And that, Darius thought, was the only victory that mattered. He walked home through the fields. The stars were bright overhead. The new crops were growing. The future was unwritten. And humanity, after all that fire, was finally at rest. Not forgotten. Not forgiven. But alive. That was enough. That was everything. 5 years passed. Aurelia Prime was no longer a graveyard. New cities rose from the ash, not replicas of the old, but something different. Something stronger. The fields were green again. Children played where fire once reigned. The memorial column stood at the center of the new capital, worn smooth by the hands of visitors who came from across human space to pay respects. At its base, flowers were always fresh. Darius became the colony's mayor. He never wanted the position. The people elected him anyway. He worked in a small office with a window that faced the hills where he had once crawled through ash and blood. Every morning, he looked at those hills. Every morning, he reminded himself why he kept building. Admiral Kalen visited on the 5th anniversary. He was older now, his hair white, his steps slower. He stood at the memorial column for an hour without speaking. Then he walked to Darius's office and sat down across from him. "You did well," Kalen said. "We did well," Darius replied. The old admiral nodded. Then he pulled a small box from his coat. Inside was a medal, the highest honor Earth could bestow. "This is yours. You earned it." Darius looked at the medal. Then he closed the box and pushed it back across the desk. "Give it to the ones who didn't come home," he said. "They earned it more." Kalen smiled, a rare, tired smile. "That's why you deserved it." The galaxy had changed. The human fleet was still the largest in recorded history, but it was no longer alone. Other species had built their own defenses, inspired by humanity's stand. The council that had once dismissed Earth now listened when humans spoke. Not out of fear. Out of respect. The difference mattered. Young officers who had been children during the war now commanded ships bearing the names of the fallen. The spirit of Aurelia. The Darius's vow. The Kalen's shadow. They sailed the dark not for revenge, for vigilance. Darius never remarried. He never had children. But the colony's orphans called him uncle. He taught them to plant gardens, to read the stars, to remember without being consumed. On the anniversary of the attack, he would gather them at the memorial column and tell the story, not of the battle, but of the people. The ones who had laughed and loved and lived before the fire came. "Their names are carved here," he would say. "But they live in you. Every time you choose kindness over fear, you honor them. Every time you build instead of destroy, they survive." The children did not fully understand. They were too young. But they listened. And they remembered. One night, Darius stood alone at the column. The stars were bright. The wind was soft. He pressed his hand to the cold stone and whispered the words he had spoken on the day of destruction. "They came without mercy. We answered with fury. But we stayed human. That was the victory." He stepped back. He walked home through the quiet fields. The new crops were growing. The future was unwritten. And in the darkness between stars, the enemy did not return. They had learned. The galaxy had learned. Humanity had taught a lesson not in cruelty, in resolve. They destroyed one colony. We unleashed 700,000 warships. Not to conquer. To protect. To ensure that no child would ever watch their world burn alone. Darius reached his door. He turned and looked up one last time. The stars were exactly where they had always been. Nothing had changed out there. Everything had changed down here. He went inside. The lights were warm. The house was quiet. And for the first time in 5 years, he did not dream of fire. He dreamed of fields, green and golden, stretching to the horizon. Children running through them, laughing. A sky full of stars that were not falling, just watching, just shining. That was the future. That was what they had fought for. Not vengeance. Peace. And Darius smiled.